The agenda of my talk is as the following. The impact of cardiovascular diseases among different populations. I'm not going to go over this extensively. This is not the main goal of the talk. But this raises the question, does it really matter if a randomized trial published in South Korea or other parts of the world, does it really apply to us when we do journal clubs and critical appraisal of many research articles? Does it really apply to our population? Clinical trials, how are we doing in the MENA region? A nice 2 documents I would highly advise you to go over when you have time. The WHO Global Action Plan for Clinical Trial Ecosystem Strengthening, and a nice report by Elsevier, Researcher of the Future. Registries are good. I made my career on registries, but the birth of the Gulf Trialists collaboration, the GTC, and I'm glad today to announce in the GIS 2025 the first randomized controlled trial that will be initiated by the GTC. So this is a nice recent document, but by the Global Burden of Diseases 2023. The GBD always every year basically updates the reports, and this is the latest report published in the Lancet. And as you can see here, that the main age of death from cardiovascular diseases basically varies around the world. It's almost 30-year difference between countries when it comes to the average age at which people die from cardiovascular diseases, underscoring inequalities in resources and interventions. You can see our color kind of in the middle there. When you look at over the years from 2013 to 2023, we're kind of here. So the expected average age, life expectancy at birth is around 74 in the North Africa, Middle East, compared to higher and lower countries. So yes, the people live in the different parts of the world, they are different. When you look at the trials and how are we doing in terms of impact on the global science arena, we are here. So we really need to do a lot of work to contribute to human science. And obviously, if you compare by income, the lower the income, the worse it is. When you look at the number of related to the countries, USA, China, India, Japan, Germany, UK, France, Netherlands, they are the top of the list. What struck me are those 2 countries, Iran and Turkey, are actually among the top countries. So even neighborhood countries have done it. So why can't we? This is the WHO document that I was referring to, Global Action Plan for Clinical Trial Ecosystem Strengthening. And the background for this report, that during the World Health Assembly in 2022, the World Health Organization member states adopted a resolution to enhance clinical trial worldwide, focusing on producing high-quality evidence and improving research quality. The WHO Global Clinical Trials Forum convened in November 2023, so exactly 2 years from now, brought together a broad spectrum of stakeholders from clinical trials communities in countries around the world to identify key challenges to agree on unified visions. The key challenges: disparities in clinical trial investment and access across different regions, with notable lack of trials in low and middle income countries despite their high burden of disease, especially in African and East Mediterranean regions, with 3% and 5% of trials globally, respectively. This is the contribution of the Africa and Eastern Mediterranean to the global clinical trials. Inadequate local public funding and lack of functional collaborative networks. Clinical trial ecosystems often experience inefficiencies, as was particularly highlighted during the pandemic, COVID-19. COVID-19 pandemic really unmasked a lot of inefficiencies around the world, and really the lack of swift movements and a lot of logistics, unneeded logistics. Redundant research efforts, poorly designed and implemented trials, a risk-averse culture that impedes innovative trial methods, and incentive structures that favor publications over scientific and social values of research. It's about how many publications you have rather than the actual scientific value. Other key challenges: inconsistent and inefficient clinical trial approval process, which vary widely between countries and often involve lengthy timelines and complex regulatory requirements, especially in multinational trials. Lack of consistent patient and community engagement. Many of the recent trials now involve patients in their own steering committees to actually take their insights. Systematic exclusion of various groups, such as pregnant women, children, and older people. For example, statins in pregnant ladies. We used to say, well, they are contraindicated. Now there are some studies that are actually questioning this. Stakeholders recognize the critical need for reforms and call for actions to foster a more effective and efficient and responsive global clinical trial ecosystem. Briefly, what are the solutions? 9 actions. Action 1, strengthen local leadership and national support for sustained infrastructure and funding. Action 2, enhance involvement and engagement with patients, communities, and the public in clinical trial life cycle. Address barriers to clinical trials in underrepresented populations. Enable effective trials through adoption of innovative designs and digital technologies. There was a nice talk yesterday about AI. Accelerate access to fit-for-purpose training packages for clinical trials. Improve coordination and streamlining regulatory and ethics approval review. Engage clinical practitioners to integrate clinical trials into health systems and practices. So it's not just researchers, involve the clinical physicians. Set up the use of trial registries to improve research transparency. And last, expand international health research and clinical trial collaboration. This is another important document released by Elsevier. They conducted a survey over thousands of doctors around the world, a researcher, and they called it the researcher of the future. They talked a lot about AI and so on. I'm just here gonna quote the researcher from the Middle East opinion. They are among the most open to relocate abroad, unfortunately, but they are receiving also more international applicants than other regions. They believe there is more emphasis on mission-oriented research. They think research must have a real-world impact. And most researchers in this region are doing public outreach. Publish or perish, under pressure, but upholding integrity. We are evaluated on publications, and the pressure increases more and more. The worst is when we are evaluated on the number of publications and not about the quality of our research. Thomas Lutcher, the editor-in-chief of European Heart Journal, and Giovanni Camici basically wrote in the European Heart Journal recently, age index, or fake index. You know, academics get really ranked based on their age index, but they question really the value of this index, and they argue for a correction factors. Does it really matter if you're a first author, last author, which is classically the senior author, versus co-authorship? مع الخير يا شجرة. So basically you're somewhere there in the middle. You haven't really done anything. You just basically collected 2-3 patients and you're part of a Lancet paper. Original article versus non-original articles. Yes, consensus documents are important, guidelines are important, but how many papers are we actually producing as original science that advances human science? And not only each index, they concluded that looking at the nature of the entire work of a scientist, its originality, beauty, its integrity, and contributions to society should not be left out. To address this, many prime universities not only consider the H index, but also grant access, mentoring, and social activities. Many of you will see their pictures there, maybe I don't know, almost 20 years ago. Actually, in this city, in Dubai, we held the first steering committee meeting for the first ACS registry in Saudi Arabia, the space registry. And out of this registry, many papers came that really defined the demographics of our country. Professor Mohammed Zubayd started the Gulf Registry. I continued with the second Gulf Registry among many great people across the Gulf. And even in the Arab world, we conducted the first acute syndrome and acute heart failure registry, 2 registries in one. Professor Muhammad Subhi, Habib Gamra, Muthana Qureshi, and many other people in collaboration with Faiz Zanat. Registries are good as descriptive methods, but the reality is there is not much really to improve science at a global level. It's good for your own countries to know what's happening. Myself, I have been part of trials. I'm sure you have been part of randomized trials. For example, I have been part of the complete trial by Shamir Mehta and this trial, IVVE, giving vaccines to heart failure patients and so on. But again, we've been part of randomized trials. How about initiating our own? Managed to get this University of Oxford course in clinical trials in October, training the next generation of clinical trialists. It was a great course in collaboration with the Saudi NIH. The GIS, led by Dr. Fawaz, actually contributed and funded 2 people, one interventional cardiologist and epidemiologist from Oman, to attend the course. It was run by Louise Bowman, Richard Bolblia, Richard Haynes, and Bruno Di Costa, in addition to top-notch speakers from our country, Professor Bahammam, Dr. Wala Garawi, and Dr. Muhammad bin Khail from the Saudi NIH. And it was a well-received course, and people from the Gulf attended this course. Came up with this crazy idea, how about making use of the people who attended this and form a core group. So you can see here Dr. Rashal Bawardi, Dr. Salam Asiri, and others, really to form this first-of-a-kind initiative as a global, a Gulf trialist collaboration on 8th of October 2025. No individual can win a game by himself. And not only this, we moved along to have people from the Gulf. So on this online meeting, steering committee meeting, you have Wa'il Mahmoud from Emirat, Haytham Amin Bahrain, Nidal Asad from Qatar, have other brilliant people moving along, rising stars, Dr. Abd al-Hamid al-Faddaq from Kuwait, and Wa'il Garawi and Salim Asira, and many other people around the Gulf region. So what is GTC? Basically, we need our own cardiovascular trials in our own population. The vision is to establish the Gulf region as an internationally renowned hub of excellence in evidence-based cardiovascular medicine, with a mission to foster a collaborative research network that conducts impactful, patient-centered, and practice-changing randomized trials by addressing the region's unique health care priorities. The major objectives is not just doing trials, it's about building an ecosystem, capacity building, evidence-based medicine. It's all about improving health, right? So it's not just about publishing. It's about when you actually go to your clinic and say, well, I remember that trial that was done by the GTC that basically can change my practice. When you get involved in trials, you develop critical thinking. So you don't just go to the abstract and read the abstract and go apply it to your own patients. You actually develop critical thinking and the way to appraise trials. 3 guiding principles: PRS, pragmatic, keep it simple; relevant, address priorities specific to our regions; and patient safety come first. So in order not to just to talk about theory, we actually we're going to initiate a trial. It is about aspirin versus clopidogrel for secondary prevention of atherosclerotic cardiovascular events in patients with chronic coronary syndrome in the Arabian Gulf countries. I called it, I'm a fan of acronyms, ARCTROS, a randomized open label multi-center trial. What is ARCTROS? It is actually, for my knowledge, it is the one of the largest stars in the sky. This is the sun, and this is Arcturus. It's almost 26 times the size of the sun, subhanallah. And we are planning to make a trial that would be the largest ever and the longest about this. I did a quick survey in the SASAS group, the interventional group in Saudi Arabia, said, what is your preferred clopidogrel monotherapy? Some answer 18 answered aspirin, clopidogrel 35, and 4 were either is okay. Again, it's a quick survey, it's not scientific, but just gives you the feel that is actually controversial, what people use in their own clinical practice. When you look at the latest 2024 ESC guideline for the management of chronic coronary syndrome, in CCS patients with a prior MI or PCI, clopidogrel 75 milligram daily is recommended as a safe and effective alternative. So it highlights that aspirin is the way to go, but tells you basically clopidogrel can be used. We have no evidence in CABG patients for clopidogrel. We have no evidence on those without prior MI or revascularization for clopidogrel. So we only have evidence for those with prior MI or PCI. There are only 2 trials in the literature, and both came from, to address this question, they both came from South Korea, Host Exam and Smart Choice, published in The Lancet. And I'm not gonna go over whole critical appraisal, but basically both studies were from South Korea. We're not South Koreans. And the actual event rates in the primary outcomes were lower than predicted, almost half, which tells you probably they are underpowered. And they did not address all comers. They are only in PCI patients. In fact, an editorial in The Lancet that commented about the latest one, clopidogrel use in chronic coronary syndrome, a fragile lifelong choice, was called the fragility index, which means how many number of patients you need to add that trial to turn it into a negative. And it was only 7 patients, which is amazing. A recent meta-analysis that basically got many trials together, Host Exam, Smart Choice, among many others, and again published in a major journal like The Lancet, and showed that clopidogrel is better than aspirin. However, unfortunately, this reminds me about something I used to watch when I was a kid, Samak Laban Tamar Hindi. So the other issues as well, cost. Still, aspirin is very cheap compared even to generic clopidogrel, and whether it matters brand versus generic. So I'm not gonna go over extensively the protocol and so on. So this is the design of our study. With the statistical analysis, a thorough statistical analysis, we reached to this sample size of 6,188 CCS patients, 3 to 6 months post-CCS, and 3 to 12 months post-acute syndrome. Randomization 1-to-1 open label treatment strategy of antiplatelet monotherapy of aspirin versus clopidogrel. With a follow-up, still we're debating in the steering committee whether it is 3 years, 5 years, which is longer than any other trial published so far, with a primary endpoint of composite of all-cause death, MI, stroke. We're wondering whether to add stent thrombosis and urgent revascularization or not. I'm glad to say that one of the co-authors and primary investigators of these South Korean studies, K.W. Park, actually contacted by Dr. Wael Mahmoud, and he was very happy to join our effort as well, so he's going to be an international advisor. We're going to seek funds from the Saudi NIH. It would be great to have the GIS, SASIS get involved. As Dr. Fawaz mentioned yesterday, GIS is not just a conference, it's a movement, so it's about generating science, new science, and that can change practice. Thank you very much for kind attention. This is my email if you'd like to contact me.